Hello everyone and welcome to today's video. Today I'm going over an article by Newsweek which talks about a new poll from the state of North Carolina which gives a look at former Democratic Governor Roy Cooper's chances at beating Republican incumbent Senator Thom Tillis. So North Carolina's former governor Roy Cooper, he left office with pretty high approval ratings, is considering running for Senate in 2026 if you are unfamiliar with this news. The Democrats are facing a pretty tough Senate map in 2026 with only a handful of seats representing vulnerable Republicans. There are also a few Senate seats Republicans are looking to pick up. But a new poll released by the Carolina Journal from the John Locke Foundation and Signal on Thursday showed Roy Cooper is viewed favorably by a significantly larger portion of North Carolinians than Thom Tillis is. The survey data found that the former Democratic governor is viewed favorably by 48% of respondents, compared to just 26% of the Republican incumbent senator favorably. That puts overall a 22-point difference of Cooper versus Tillis in favorability. Now, I know favorability can get talked about in elections and say, well, does favorability really make that much of a difference? Well, when there's a 22-point gap between one candidate and another, it's going to make up a pretty big difference. The Republican unfavorables are also higher than Cooper's, where Tillis has 46% unfavorable to 37% unfavorable for Cooper. The poll from May 11th to May 13th included 614 likely voters and has a margin of error of plus or minus 3.94%. Another poll conducted from March from a Democratic-aligned pollster showed Roy Cooper ahead of Thom Tillis in the hypothetical matchup. The Democrat won by 47% to Tillis's 43%. An additional 9% said they were unsure about who they would support. The PPP survey additionally showed 47% had a positive view of Cooper and 42% had an unfavorable view. For Tillis, 25% said they approved of his job performance, while 46% disapproved. So again, that's two polls in a row now, one Democratic poll, one not Democratic poll. You could argue it's either Republican aligned or neutral, that showed Tillis in the mid-20s for approval, where Cooper was in the high to mid-40s. So can the Democrats actually flip North Carolina? Well, North Carolina hasn't gone for a Democratic candidate in a presidential election since 2008. Democrats have managed some recent statewide victories, however, for governor. It voted for Cooper in 2016 and 2020, and now Democratic Governor Josh Stein won in 2024, even though Donald Trump won the state on the same ticket for president. Due to the Republican candidate having a very bad scandal, Stein was able to win with nearly 55% of the vote. The Republican averaged around 41% of the vote. The last Democrat to serve in the Senate was the late Senator Kay Hagan, who won the election in 2008 but was then defeated by Thom Tillis in her re-election bid in 2014. The Cook Political Report currently has the Senate race listed as lean Republican. Look, the North Carolina Senate race in 2026 is going to be very fascinating, and it's going to be very, very close. And I've done some videos in the past talking about this, but just to show you, again, at the presidential level, I would consider North Carolina to be a lean Republican state. It voted for Trump by lean Republican in 2024 by 3.5%. 2020 voted for Trump by 1.3. 2016, Trump 3.7. 2012, Romney 2.0. You have to go back to 2008, the last time it did not vote lean Republican. The trend has certainly been very consistent. North Carolina has been lean Republican. The margin's been a little different depending, though. Trump won it by 3.5 in 2016, only 1.3 in 2020, but then he won it by 3.2 in 2024. The Senate level, it's a little bit more interesting because it was lean Republican for Ted Budd in 2022 when he won it by 3.2%. This is more of what President Trump's win in 2024 looked like for Ted Budd. In 2020, however, Thom Tillis only won re-election by 1.7%, getting only 48.7% of the vote against a Democratic candidate who had a late-breaking scandal that really tanked any chances of him winning, and Tillis still only won by 1.7%, with two third-party candidates averaging about 4.5% of the vote. Going back to the last election in 2016, the Republican senator who retired at the time won by 5.7%, but again, we can look at Thom Tillis' victory versus Kay Hagan, where Tillis only won by 1.6%. And in this case, it was a very great night for the Republicans. 2014, a Republican wave year. He was going up against a Democratic incumbent and won a very close election, again, likely in large part due to the third-party candidate likely helping him out. Whereas in 2020, it looked like he was really vulnerable and in a position to lose, but the Democratic candidate only got 46.94%. Just to give you an idea, Kay Hagan in 2014 got 47.26%, and in 2022, where the Democrat lost to Ted Budd, the Democrats still got 47.27% of the vote. And I've done this math before. In both of Thom Tillis' elections, he got 48.7%. 2014, he got 48.8%. So from 2014 to 2020, Thom Tillis actually went down 0.1% in terms of actual vote share. As for 2026, what this means, well, we know that in 2026, Thom Tillis is going to be in a lot of trouble because his approval rating, not even among Democrats or independents, but his approval rating within his own party is not very good, as that poll suggested. You don't have a 26% approval rating without members of your own party not liking you. And the main criticism for Tillis by Republicans is that he has not been pro-Trump and loyal enough to the president as much as they would like. That's the main knock on Thom Tillis. The problem is, if the Republicans try and primary out Thom Tillis, I could see it going one of two ways. One, where Tillis wins, but the primary challenge is not successful, but then Tillis has had all the baggage of going through the primary process and having the Republicans try and get rid of him. A, North Carolina voters probably won't like that, but B, nasty primaries almost always spell doom for the incumbent candidate, whether it's in the Senate or the House or governor. Primaries are never good for the candidate going to the general election. Based on election history, it almost always seems to end in them losing. But now let's go down the road of they do successfully primary Thom Tillis. Well, then the Republican Party, again, will have gone through a nasty primary process, and maybe that Republican, like if it was Laura Trump, maybe she would be stronger in a general election and more liked among Republicans than Thom Tillis, but there would still be a lot of Republicans in the state that are loyal to Thom Tillis that are in that 26%, maybe that do want to vote for him. A lot of them, I'm sure, will vote for whoever the Republicans put up, but all the Republicans need is 1 to 2 to 3% of the vote or so that say they don't want to vote for the Republican out of spite because their candidate got primaried out. Then we can get into a very close scenario where the Democrats could win. The problem for the Republicans is right now, Willie Nickel, the former U.S. Rep from North Carolina 13th District, it's no offense to him, but I think he gives the Democrats a decent starting floor. In a very close election between Tillis and Nickel, I think it's really a 50-50 race that you can give to the Republicans or the Democrats. I think Tillis starts out as the slight favorite in that one, but Tillis' approval ratings certainly give you pause. If it's Roy Cooper versus Thom Tillis, I think it's a totally different ballgame here. Because I've talked about in the past where governors running for Senate has not always gone that well, but typically they're doing it in states that are not very competitive. For instance, when Steve Bullock, the Democrat, ran for governor against Steve Daines in 2020, it was in the state of Montana, which is a safe Republican state. We just saw Larry Hogan, a Republican, run for Senate in the state of Maryland in 2024. He lost by about 12.5%. It's a safe Democratic state. Phil Bredesen in 2018 did the same thing. Safe Republican state, Democratic governor, lost. But we did see this close race in 2018 in the state of Florida, where the Republican governor who was term limited, Rick Scott, decided, I'm going to take a run for Senate against the Democratic incumbent Bill Nelson. And Florida at this time was still a very close competitive swing state. It had not gone as sharply to the right as it is now. But it was a very close election where a lot of the arguments are being used of, well, a governor doesn't usually win a Senate race. But it's different when it's in a swing state than it is when it's in a safe Republican or safe Democratic state. Rick Scott was able to win by just 0.12%, so it was very, very narrow, but he was able to defeat a long-term Democrat incumbent. So why am I bringing that up? Because Roy Cooper presents the Democrats a very real possibility, and I think a better than 50% chance possibility at winning North Carolina in 2026. And for me, it all just comes down to the math. In Roy Cooper's 2 elections, his first one started in 2016. He defeated Republican Governor Pat McCrory, who, in 2016, got 48.8% of the vote. And that number is going to come up again in just a minute. But Roy Cooper got 49%. In 2020, he won re-election by 4.5%. He cannot run again to a third term. North Carolina has limited governors to 2 terms. But Cooper got 49% in his first term and got 51.5% in his second term, and left office with high approval numbers. Again, Thom Tillis only got 48.7% in 2020, and in the Great Republican Night in 2014, where he defeated an incumbent senator, only got 48.82%. There aren't a lot of things in politics you can be totally sure of, but I would say I could bet this. Roy Cooper is probably going to get around 49% of the vote, at least. The second he announces he's running for governor, without a doubt, Republicans are going to hit him hard on campaign advertising, on commercials. Their Republicans are going to try everything they can to tie Roy Cooper to out-of-state Washington Democrats like Chuck Schumer, like Nancy Pelosi, like Joe Biden, like Kamala Harris, without a doubt. And it's going to hurt his approval numbers a little bit, without a doubt, because the polls always go down for governors when they run for Senate, as the races are more nationalized and honestly more nasty than the governor's races. So Cooper's approval numbers will go down. But that doesn't mean Cooper is necessarily going to lose either. Right now, if it was Cooper versus Tillis, even with the primary cycle, Republicans will try and tie Cooper to the D.C. Democrats. And a lot of Republicans in North Carolina don't like probably the D.C. Democrats and want to keep the Senate race red. But there's also a lot of Republicans in North Carolina that don't want Thom Tillis to be in there. And one of the Republicans' biggest knocks and criticism the last few years is that when Donald Trump is not at the top of the ticket, a lot of Republicans, a lot of pro-Trump Republicans especially, don't turn out to vote. Thom Tillis has yet to break 49% of the vote, and I expect Roy Cooper to be right around that 49%. So, in my view, to see Thom Tillis win this race, he needs to be around 49.5% at the absolute lowest to win this race. And right now, I actually don't think that's the likeliest outcome. I think Roy Cooper defeating Thom Tillis in North Carolina, if Roy Cooper declares that he's running in 2026, this is how I have the race starting out right now. It'd be an under 1% win. I think the similarities between the Florida Senate race in 2018 with Rick Scott and Bill Nelson, I think would be eerily similar, where it's just it's a Democrat being a Republican instead of vice versa. But I think this race, honestly, right now would start out in favor of Roy Cooper. It's a perfect storm of a former Democratic governor that's popular and a Republican incumbent who's not popular. I think is just enough, even in a lean Republican state, in a very close competitive state, where I think Roy Cooper and the Democrats would be able to pick up a very narrow seat here in North Carolina. And that doesn't mean North Carolina, I think, is going to be blue, for instance, going forward because this seat flips. For instance, in 2028, no matter who the Republicans or Democrats are, I still expect the Republican to win it in a lean Republican margin. At absolute worst, Republicans win it in tilt. I know Democrats, if they win the Senate seat, are going to say North Carolina is going to go blue in 2028. I'm telling you right now, I don't think that's going to happen. I also think Ted Budd, who is up for re-election in 2028, I believe 2028, he was first elected in 2022. I fully expect him to win re-election. There's not another Democrat as strong, in my view, as Roy Cooper in North Carolina, unless it's the governor, Josh Stein. But even then, I still think Ted Budd would win. But for 2026, for Roy Cooper versus Thom Tillis, it's kind of becoming a perfect storm where the Democrats have a real opportunity here to put a blue senator in a lean Republican state. I hope you enjoyed this video. Make sure to hit like and subscribe. Leave a comment below telling me your thoughts. Thank you so much for watching. I hope to see you in the next video.